What is wrong with Will Reichard? What is wrong with Sam Darnold? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. Appreciate you all so very much. Thank you so much for hanging out. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the playoffs with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, it is Wednesday, and that means we're going to go over some of the deeper film stuff that went down, and I have three major points to make. I talked about a couple of these yesterday on the mailbag, but I want to get a little bit more in depth. First off, I want to investigate what is wrong with the kicker. What's up with Will Reichard? This has kind of been my main theme of the week. It's just the thing I kind of stumbled into because I ended up going down a pretty hard rabbit hole of kicker stuff. And what I just found really interesting. So I'm going to share that with you, even though I'm sure it's not the most pressing question on your mind is the kicker. But I think a lot of people are curious about it, and I want to try to satisfy that curiosity. We'll also spend plenty of time talking about Sam Darnold and the passing game, the pressure and stuff. But really what was going on downfield is what I was more interested in. So we'll talk a little bit about Darnold and about what went on downfield with Hockenson that we talked about a little bit yesterday, Jefferson, Addison, all of that. The main point there is that guys were open all day and Sam Darnold missed him, but I'll go into a lot more detail about it. So with Will Reichard, what's wrong with him, right? So he has missed 6 kicks this year. 2 of them came in the Colts game. One was a 57-yard boomer that hit the crossbar. That came up just short, but was a very good kick. And then there were a couple more concerning ones. There was a miss from 31. There was a couple of misses from in the 40s. More concerning ones. So what is happening is the question. And to understand that, you have to understand kicking, the mechanics of kicking. So I've written now twice about kicking. By the time you listen to this, it'll probably be out. If not, it'll be out soon. I wrote an article for Wide Left about this exact thing. Will Reichard, I went over every single miss. And the themes of that were, I'll cut to the chase right away. It is either, to me, an injury thing or a rookie thing. I'll get into a lot more detail about it. But injury thing or a rookie thing, I can't really decide which. It's pretty hard to tell. Make of that what you will. I do not see a long-term issue here. And what is doing a lot for me is that all of these kicks were long and close and straight. They weren't gnarly shanks or, really bad strikes. They were long, they were straight. They were actually kind of too straight. I think 3 of the misses were doinks. And then another one off the crossbar. These are minuscule margins, right? That are the difference between, oh my God, he's missed 6 kicks and he's missed a couple and he's a rookie. It's actually pretty good. So that said, game of inches, it counts. We still got to talk about it. But when Reichard lines himself up on the upright, when he actually sets up to kick, when he the actual kicking motion, his plant foot is very often straight down the line. When he is kicking from the right hash, he'll actually angle that foot in. And what that does is it brings his body around and hopefully gets a little bit of leftward motion in it to kind of centralize that thing. It's a small little adjustment that he makes, but I like it. But when he's on the left hash, he doesn't do the same thing, because I think to open your foot up would cause more issues. So it doesn't work that way, and it goes straight down the line. But regardless of which hash he's on, these balls come off of his foot dead down the hash mark, right down the line. His hips are very straight. He's cleanly hitting the ball, and he's kicking it very straight. That is a great place to start, But what that means is that you're giving yourself a very small margin for error. You're kicking that thing in the upright and hoping it just sort of barely leaks in, which a lot of his makes have done that too. Reichard is magnetized toward the upright. And the reasons for that, this is where I suddenly geeked out really hard and got really fascinated, I think are a little strategic. I think that he is making technical choices that I don't necessarily agree with and that he's kind of getting burned for, but they're choices. And what's nice is when the problem is a choice you made, the fix is to just make a different one next time, and you don't necessarily have to screw up your whole process, because I think they're setup choices. So let's say you're kicking off of the left hash. Something you might want to do is, instead of when you set up and you actually come through the ball, typically you want your hips to be straight right at the time that your leg comes through. You don't want them to be early. You don't want them to be late. If there's any dissonance between your hips and your leg and your shoulders and all that stuff, it makes the whole process wonky. You can come in at a weird angle. You can come in, if you think of your leg as a pendulum, and that means that, like, if you swing your leg out and around and you put a piece of chalk on your shoe, you draw a circle. You ever do that experiment in like biology class? And that's, we could make a compass out of our legs, right? Like the way that they're built. So it's a curve, and you want your foot to strike the ball right at the part of that curve where you're facing dead upwards. And if you are early, you're going to kind of be facing out. And if you're late, you're going to be facing in. So this has come up with Justin Tucker. Alex Katzen wrote a phenomenal article at SB Nation trying to explain Justin Tucker's woes. And he had input from Fresno State's special teams coach. I think his name is John Baxter. And the answer was that because he's a little older, his leg is coming through a little bit late. Things are slower than they used to be. And that means that his leg is coming through a little leftwardly, and that is making all of his misses. And if you notice all of his misses, they're all to the left. And that's what's happening to Justin Tucker right now, and he needs to recalibrate. And a lot of these kickers that go really deep into their career, kick into their 40s, are recalibrating this stuff all the time. As their bodies change, they have to tweak their timings, and they have to kind of constantly be recalibrating. I think that's part of why kicking is so inconsistent, and why a good kicker can suddenly melt down. You can have Dan Baileys, who are great kickers for a long time, but then in their older age, they suddenly lose it and they suck. If a little bit of your timing changes because your flexibility changes, and this is where I think Reichard's injury could be coming in. If his quad is a little stiff and things aren't coming as fast as he's used to, that could create a tiny little thing. And on 50-plus yard kicks, a tiny little thing can mean several feet off of where he means to be. So what he's trying to do is make everything come through straight and in sync. Your hips are aligned, your feet are aligned, your shoulders are aligned. Everything comes in straight and in sync. And what I thought was fascinating was in the Colts game, the one where he got hurt. And he said he came into that game with a little bit of stiffness. Matt Daniels said he didn't know about the stiffness till after the extra point. So I think maybe he might have had a little bit of soreness, and then he exacerbated it on an extra point, which happened after the 2 field goal misses. On those 2 field goal misses, his hips were aligned almost 45 degrees to the right. His hips did not come through the way that they usually do, and then those balls both shanked off to the right. Those were the 2 worst kicks of his season in that Indy game. So whether that's because he wasn't healthy is one thing, but I think it might not have been that. I think it could have been, and I'm just watching the tape and guessing here, so big old grain of salt. But I have a theory that it was him trying to angle his kick toward the inside a little bit and just over-angling it. I think he just set up and overcorrected a little bit, which was a pretty easy correction to fix when he came back finally and he kicked for the Atlanta game. He missed a pretty long one there by straightening back out too much, and then the ball doinks off the upright. But he made another long kick that ended up getting negated it was like a 30-some yard. That one wasn't long. That got negated because of a defensive holding penalty, and then the Vikings ended up scoring a touchdown, so he didn't even get to re-kick it. And so the only kick that actually counted was off the upright, and he missed. And then I think it's fascinating that He played against Chicago, and then he played outdoors in the rain, didn't miss any kicks there in Seattle. And then the next kind of meltdown came against Green Bay, where a lot of that same thing happened, where these kicks started at the hash and just didn't move at all. They didn't lean inside, they didn't lean outside, and one's off the crossbar, one's off the upright, one leaks just a little bit outside. So I think calibrating where his leg is at with the injury he has is giving him a little bit of trouble. Don't see a long-term issue. I do see a potential short-term issue if he doesn't recalibrate that. So this could bite him in the playoffs, absolutely, for sure. But I don't think there is a solve to that makes any sense. And I would expect that coming back next year, assuming he's fully healthy and he's a little bit more used to his body, he's got every chance in the world to, sort that all out. So that's where I'm at on Will Reichard. Short-term issue, not a long-term issue, but that doesn't mean it's not necessarily a concern. You might want to tweak your distances going into this Ram game and say, hey, maybe we can't really get you for a 57 or a 55 yarder, maybe be a little bit more willing to go for it on fourth down at long distances. But I think once you get under 50, these issues are all minuscule enough where they aren't going to be nearly as likely to come up. But maybe don't try the 55 yarders as much. That would, I guess, be my action item here. But I know it's special teams. Okay. I know you're here for the offense. You're here for Sam Darnold. You're here for T.J. Hockenson and Justin Jefferson. Let's get into what went wrong on that passing offense next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. The playoffs are going on right now, and from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are, of course, better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed whether you win or lose. So throw down $5 on the stupidest parlay ever. Try to pick every game. Justin Jefferson over 100 yards. Whatever it is you want. Emotional hedge on the Rams. I don't judge you. Whatever it is, whether that wins or loses, you get $200 in bonus bets. And the FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets. As of this recording, the Vikings are 2.5-point favorites in LA. So if you want to take Rams plus 2.5, and then if the Vikings win by 1 point, you get to be happy and win your bet. And even if you lose it, that first $5 bet still gets you $200 in bonus bets. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Like I mentioned, there is an article about this over at Wide Left. There's also a Patreon video on patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. And there's a Patreon video on T.J. Hockenson as well that is going to serve as kind of me showing my work. So if you don't believe what I'm about to say, you can go watch that video. See for yourself and make your own judgments. But I think the tape is pretty clear that the point I want to drive home is that T.J. Hockenson was wide open all day long. Just like every play, he was open. Justin Jefferson was open a ton. Jordan Addison open a ton. The Lions used a ton of man coverage in this one, just like Matt Derry said they would, by the way. And while Amik Robinson has viral cut-ups going up, I'm going to tell you right now, they're very cherry-picked. There are some not-so-great moments on that tape that he does not want you to see. But he had a cool quote in the locker room and a couple of very visible plays on the Sunday Night Football broadcast. So he gets crowned with the win. I think it's not a holistic evaluation. He did have a bunch of really nice reps on Justin Jefferson. He totally deserves flowers for that, but it's not his whole game. And it's definitely not the case that the Vikings all got clamped downfield all day long. Absolutely not. Completely outside, fantasy. Absolutely not. I would bet my whole life on it that if you watch that tape all the way through, all 22, and really focused on it, you would go, oh, yeah, they were everywhere. The problem was at quarterback. That was what I thought in the live eye. Watching the tape only confirmed it. Sam Darnold just wasn't good. And what made him not good, we're going to get back into mechanics again, was a sense of I don't know what the right word, discombobulation, but that can't be the best word for this. But his feet, his eyes, his shoulders, his hips were not linked up in the way that they're supposed to be. So in this offense, in an Eddie McVay offense, And most of the offenses in the NFL are pure progression offenses right now. That's kind of the thing in fashion. In a pure progression offense, where you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the field. This is McVay, Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell. Ben Johnson is this as well, even though he's not off that tree. You want your feet and your eyes to be married. So when you go back and you look at a thing, to your left, you want your feet to be aligned to your left and you're reading that route. And if you get the information you're looking for, hey, that thing's going to break in and the corner's in outside leverage, rip it, you're good to go. If you don't have the right leverage or if he's not open or whatever, then you got to move on to the next thing. Very crucially with those, you have to teach it so that you're not waiting for that route to get open. You're looking for an indicator that it will. So you're not saying, does Justin Jefferson look open? You're saying, does Justin Jefferson have inside leverage because he's going to break in on this route? I think Darnold usually has done a very good job of being anticipatory about this. That gives you those anticipation throws, those really nice, oh wow, the body got there right as he broke free. DB had no chance. Those really fun ones. Because logically, hey, that corner's backed off too much and this is going to be a comeback. That's going to be there. I can throw it now. Or he's turned his back, he can't even see. I can definitely throw it now. Darnold is fantastic about this most of the time. In that game, he was waiting a little bit for things to get open, I think. And so your brain and your body are doing two different things when you do this. And it's part of what makes this super, super, super hard. Your brain is making decisions about, do I see the right leverage? Is that open? Should I throw that? Should I move on? You're making those decisions, right? Your body is getting a certain drop back, right? 3 steps, 3 and a hitch, 5 steps, 5 and a hitch. Those drop backs all have to be exactly the same time all the time because the whole playbook is designed so that if this is a play that's got a 5-step drop and a hitch, at that hitch, the first route's breaking open. And then after another hitch, that second route's breaking open. And after a third hitch, the third route is breaking open. So what that means is if anything throws that timing out of whack, you get into really awkward situations. That will happen, right? Like it makes for really delicate offense that can kind of be susceptible to, if you have to take an extra step to sidestep a little pressure, you kind of just lost a route. And you got to just kind of skip right to the third one, or you got to make an awkward throw, or you kind of got to figure something out. And I think this whole year, Darnold has been really good at navigating those like slightly adjusted situations. And I think that's one of the things that has taken this offense to a level that it didn't have with Kirk Cousins, who was fantastic at that plan A, that really complicated marriage of feet and eyes and reading and making those decisions. But the second the timing got just a little off because he had to sidestep or because somebody got mugged on a route and it didn't break when it was supposed to, or any of those little things, you would get, all kinds of bad stuff would start to happen. Darnold's been better about that. Not in this game, though. In this game, because I think his brain was a little bit behind his feet would move on before he was ready to make the decision for his brain to move on. And that led to some off-platform throws that didn't need to be off-platform, or he had to reset his feet. Now the whole thing is just taking too long. The timing's completely off. The DB can get back into it. The ball is behind the receiver. That happened a lot. The ball's too high now because he's worried about somebody jumping it, so he's got to put it high, which is, out of their range, so it's safer, but it's harder catch. All those things would happen. I think that marriage and the complexity of the offense, which is its strength, that is so unbelievably hard to defend when it is executed properly. And it has been executed properly all year long. And defenses have not been able to contain it. There have been a few that have had reasonably good days. Arizona had an okay day against them to start out. I thought Seattle had started having an okay day against them, but kind of fell apart. Atlanta had an okay day for kind of 2 quarters, and then it totally melted down and ended up being a 42-pointer. Teams have figured that out. I think they're like 12th in EPA per play or something like that. Like, it's not gangbusters, but it's been good enough to, get this going. And they've surely been able to move the ball, even in maybe their worst offensive day outside of this Lions game, which was the Jaguars game. They moved the ball at will. Sam Darnold just kept turning it over in the red zone. this is what killed him in the red zone, by the way, this sort of feet to eyes problem that ruined all these timings and made it so, especially on the goal line, when these windows are laser tight. You might have seen, if you're on social media a lot, you might have seen one of those plays, the one, it was fourth down, the one where Sam Darnold scrambled out and ended up throwing one on the run to Jordan Addison. He couldn't make the diving catch, where it was a rub route situation where one, I think it was Naylor, was running just like a stick route, just a quick like hitch. And then there was a slant right underneath that. And the whole idea, it was from a stack. And the whole idea is to hopefully get the corners to run into each other. And they did. And Jordan Addison was wide open. Darnold looking right at it, didn't throw it. That's slowing a little bit. Why that happened? You could speculate all day long. You could say it was the nerves. You can say it was the noise. You can say it was just an off night. You can say he was hungover. Like, say whatever you want. You'd be guessing as much as I would be guessing. So I'm not going to do that. All I have is the film and what it said. And what it said was that the timings were not proper. Mix that with some inaccuracies, missing high a little bit, and you lose a ton of opportunities, even though guys were winning when they were supposed to downfield. The ball was not where it was supposed to be when it was supposed to be. The players were. Bar none, I'm not arguing that with anybody. So that's unfortunate. There's also the pressure angle on it, where Darnold was, had to sidestep or something like that. I know the pressure numbers are really gaudy. I'd be curious to see how that splits for 3 seconds versus 2.5 versus 3.5. Like, I'd be curious to see when those came. I think a lot of those came late in the down. And I would put a lot of those on Darnold, but Brandel didn't have a good game. Cam Robinson didn't have a good game. Like, we don't have to mince words about that. So other guys did, on the front didn't have good games too, but really it comes down to those timings being messed up. So the next question is, how does this bounce back? Does it bounce back? And how can we find a way to fix it before the Vikings travel to LA to play the Rams? That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks, the best way to play daily fantasy football. Look, 5 of these playoff games, I don't really care about. I'm not one of those people that's going to look for matchups. They could play Detroit. They could play Tampa. They could play Philly. They could play Washington in a weird situation. All of those teams are good in one way or another, and you're not going to find the cupcake schedule in the playoffs, right? And plus, you got to win the Rams game anyways to even be worrying about that. So it's totally out of my mind, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. It's going to give me a stake, because when I'm watching the Texans and who is it? The Chargers. I'm going to have, Lad McConkey probably, I'm going to do a goblin for 49.5 receiving yards and pick the more than, and kind of some stuff like that. So I have a little bit of a stake in the game. That is what PrizePicks has been for me all year long. I've been having a huge blast with PrizePicks. It's been my main squeeze all year long. So all you got to do is whatever it is for passing yards, rushing touchdowns, whatever, and you can get a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. You can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Once again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an app that helps you get your spending under control. If you're like me, you sign up for stuff and then you forget about it and you pay for it for years and you don't even know that you're throwing all of that money away. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel those unwanted subscriptions. But it doesn't just do that. It helps you monitor your spending, helps you lower your bills, and helps you figure out your whole daily, weekly, monthly budget and figure out where maybe you could cut back. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and they've saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So let's problem solve here a little bit on the Locked On Vikings podcast. And for one, we have to identify what problems we have to solve and what problems we don't have to solve. So I want to start this by talking a little bit more about T.J. Hockenson. And Hockenson is such a good route runner, especially for a tight end, but just as a pass catcher, he is a fantastic separator. Dude is open all the time. And for a tight end, all separation needs to be is an angle you can box out at. You don't need to, cook somebody, cross them up, make your step over them like you're Allen Iverson. All you got to do is get a yard or a half a yard away and get to the right angle where you can body him out because you're a huge human. Large man, you can't get past me. And for Hockenson, he can get that posture on someone so reliably, and all you got to do, put it between the 8 and the 7 and get him to come down with it. Too often, this whole year, throws to Hockenson have been way outside of his frame. Up high, make him dive for it, make him, splay out for it. And so when he doesn't come down with a couple of them, it's really hard for me to be mad because, I still remember the Seattle Seahawks 4th down, twisting, turning over his head. He makes these often. And I'm more upset with Darnold for making it that hard on him. That's why I'm being really militant that this game was on Darnold and not the pass catchers. I'm usually a lot more medium about my opinions on this, but this particular one, I just don't think is ambiguous at all. I think it's just very clearly guys were open. The scheme worked. They had their man beaters. Guys beat coverage. The ball was off target. Or late, or didn't get thrown, weirdly turned down. And now it's a scramble drill. It is what it is. When Hockenson runs those routes in particular, I've talked a lot about Addison and Jefferson's route running and how they kind of widen their stems. Hockenson does that as well. He's really good at knowing exactly how far off his path he can get before he's not fast enough to get back. He knows exactly that boundary. And so he knows how he can do that, but he pushes that envelope. And he can widen out linebackers really well that way, especially when he's running choice. Why choice is my favorite thing T.J. Hockenson does on the whole team. It converts 3rd and longs. It's also a nice, reliable 6 yards on 1st down. I think it's one of the best plays in their book. They run it a few times every game. And honestly, I think they could run it 10 times a game. It is so good. But let's say he's got a linebacker and that linebacker is dropped to whatever, they're dropping to. And let's say that guy's outside of him, but he's running choice. He's going to want to break this off to the inside. A lot of players would run dead ahead, which is what you're doing on the playbook. It's run forward 5 yards, make your little wiggle move, and then break whatever way you're supposed to break on choice. But Hockenson will run it straight at the linebacker and force that guy to freeze. Your feet, if you're a linebacker, you are identifying the tight end as your man in coverage, whether it's man or zone, whatever your rules are, you say, I got him, and he comes at you, your feet are going to stop. You will get stuck in mud. And then Hockenson can break it off and you're absolutely cooked. He got open a few times on that. I think Alex Anzalone, for as much praise as he got, took a few pretty hideous L's and got lucky that the balls got missed. Otherwise, we would be, I think, singing a pretty different tune about that matchup this week. So some parts of that are encouraging, right? Not everybody got absolutely smoked against the Lions. Some guys did. Quarterback played terribly. Vikings lost the game. You deserve to lose the game when your quarterback plays terribly. I think the O-line in pass pro got killed. I think they did a fine job in run. I think schematically, Ben Johnson ran laps around Brian Flores for the 4th time now. So all these things went wrong. But there's something lightly encouraging about knowing, okay, if the Lions show up in man cover again, let's say the Vikings do end up playing the Lions again, and the Lions show up in man cover again, guys will be open and we just need our QB to calm the heck down. So if we're looking for a problem solving here, I think on the defensive side of the ball with Flores, I got nothing. That's solving Ben Johnson is very far away from my pay grade. Maybe Brian Flores is the only person in the world that has a chance to do that. But on the offensive side of the ball, it's just calm down, Sam Darnold. That's what needs to happen here. or identify what was wrong. A lot of it was that the Vikings got blitzed a lot. Now, Sam Darnold's been phenomenal against the blitz. He was not on Sunday night. So again, was it a calm down thing? I think part of that is when you do have a hesitation and then there's somebody coming, the more you elongate that process, the more a delayed blitzer matters. And delayed blitzers are basically impossible for the protection to pick up because everything is already declared in all of its matchups. So whatever this is, right? Whatever the root of that problem is, which you kind of only really know if you're in the room with the quarterbacks, with a newly rostered Daniel Jones. I should probably mention that. Daniel Jones hits the 53-man roster for at least wild card weekend. That does mean that he will count toward the compensatory formula. So if Daniel Jones doesn't sign with the Vikings for 2025, still very much an option, by the way, but assuming that doesn't happen and he does sign somewhere else, he will count toward the compensatory formula, and then we start watching how big that contract is. So that did happen. Brett Rippon was waived for this. He'll probably be back on the practice squad, and you just switch those two for a week. Because I think they like Brett Rippon better than Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has been here for 2 months, right? Like, I think there's no pressure on him. But if all he did was sit on our practice squad for a year, get one game check, and then go, shove off to the Raiders and become their quarterback for $40 million a year, like, then we did it, right? Probably not going to be that big a contract. But anyways, unless you're in the room, you don't know why. But if it's what everybody thinks, and it's that Darnold was a little too amped up on a huge stage in a huge moment, you have to find a way to calm him down. And if you can do that, I don't think much else needs to fundamentally change about the Vikings offense. And that's good news. The solvability of it is good news. The problem is, can you calm down Sam Darnold in a moment that is now do or die that he's never been in? This is his first ever real playoff game, unless you're like the guy who asked the question yesterday, and maybe the last game was kind of technically the first playoff game because the atmosphere was close enough. But this is the first time he's in a win or go home playoff atmosphere on Monday Night Football in LA. Crowd's going to be rocking. It's probably going to be a 50-50 crowd. You've never been in that situation before. How will Sam Darnold respond? And will Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown and Grant Udinski be able to get him ready for that and manage him as the stresses of that game go on? The whole year tells us that they're pretty good at this. The last game tells us that they weren't very good at this. So there's your intrigue. Was last week the beginning of the end, or do we have like 14 other examples of Sam Darnold actually staying really calm and being really good in all of these situations? And can we still do that? I don't know. We'll talk to Locked On Rams tomorrow, and then we'll do this over-under. We'll do all our own whole normal thing. I'm thinking about maybe a history lesson. We have an extra show because it's Monday night. So we have the Monday morning show, and we'll have already done all of our bold predictions and all that stuff. So I'm thinking maybe a little Rams-Vikings playoff history lesson because it is quite the story, but I don't know. Let me know if that sounds really boring to you and you really just want to like hear more about like blitz packages or whatever. I'm happy to do that too. Let me know. I will see you all tomorrow, Crossover Thursday, and as always, Skull.